Okay, so let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a problem that feels so modern, the way we disagree with each other. But we're going to do it by looking back, way back, to the 17th century. And it turns out they had some unbelievably clever ways of thinking about truth and opposition that we could really learn from today.
I mean, this is the goal, right? It's such a beautiful idea. The person who thinks differently from you isn't your enemy. They're actually making your own understanding of the world richer. It's a really powerful place to start.
And here we are at the heart of the problem. We all kind of know, on some level, that different viewpoints are a good thing. But let's be real. When you look at our conversations, especially online, they feel more like battlefields than anything else. So, what gives? What went so wrong?
To get some answers, we're actually going to travel back in time, about 400 years. Because this whole problem of trying to figure out truth when everyone has a different idea, it is not new. And the past has some pretty amazing visual lessons for us.
Back then, one of the coolest ways to share a big idea was through something called an emblem. Think of it as an image with a short, punchy motto. Kind of like the memes of their day, really. And two guys used these emblems to lay out two totally different ways of seeing the world.
So here they are. On one side, you have this really rigid one-truth-only vision from a guy named Sebastian de Covarrubias. And on the other, you have a much more flexible, inclusive idea from Filippo Piccinelli. Let's dig into what they were really arguing about.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Covarrubias, who, by the way, was a consultant for the Holy Office of the Inquisition, so, not exactly open to new ideas, he saw only one single path to truth. His emblem showed these weird squared lenses that make you see 100 things where there's only one. For him, any other opinion was just a shadow or a lie. But then, just over 50 years later, Piccinelli comes along with this completely different model. He's saying, wait a minute, what if one divine wisdom can shine in many different ways?
And you really have to appreciate the context here. This wasn't some friendly academic debate in a coffee shop. For Piccinelli to even suggest that there were multiple paths to wisdom, that was incredibly dangerous, especially at the height of the Inquisition.
His emblem was titled Unus e Multiplex, which literally means one and multiple, and his whole argument is built around this beautiful metaphor of light. He's making the case that a single divine truth can show up in a whole bunch of different ways, and we need to be smart enough to see it wherever it appears.
Let's break this down because it's pretty cool. The sun, that's the one divine truth. The rainbow, that represents the prophets and apostles. They get that truth straight from the source. But then, look closer. There's a reflection of that rainbow in the water, and that reflection symbolizes the wisdom you might find in so-called pagan thinkers. It's the same light, just seen indirectly.
I mean, you have to understand, this was a huge deal. It was this quiet but revolutionary plea for intellectual tolerance. Piccinelli's was basically suggesting that you could find value and even truth in people the church considered non-believers. That was a really risky thing to say when only one institution was supposed to have all the answers.
And this is where Piccinelli was just brilliant. He created a hierarchy. See, he wasn't saying that pagan wisdom was equal to the wisdom of the prophets. No. He called it a reflection, a kind of borrowed light. And that little move was pure genius. It let him argue for its value while protecting himself from being called a heretic.
So, Piccinelli gives us this amazing model for how to tolerate different views. But another emblem from that same time takes it a huge step further. It argues that we don't just tolerate opposing views, we actually need them to be strong.
And for that idea, we turn to this emblem. It's just a simple Roman arch, but wow, is it a powerful and elegant metaphor for why we need constructive conflict in our lives.
The motto just says it all. They would fall if not opposed to one another. Think about that. The very thing that makes the arch strong is the fact that its pieces are pushing against each other. If you take away that opposition, the whole thing comes crashing down.
So let's just think about how a real arch is built, right? You have these stones, and they're set against each other. Each one is pushing with equal force against the one opposite it. And it's that perfectly balanced resistance, that mutual opposition, that creates this incredibly stable, powerful structure.
And the guy who made this emblem, Andres Mendo, he wasn't just talking about architecture. He spells it out for us. He says this is exactly how good governance is supposed to work. When a leader hears out all the contrary opinions before making a decision, that final decision is going to be way stronger, more thoughtful, and more secure. The debate is what builds the arch.
So, all of this brings us right back to today. These old emblems, they give us this beautiful picture of debate as this constructive force.
But let's be honest, does that sound anything like our world today?
Okay, check this out. This is a medieval stained glass window from Spain, and it's labeled Dialectica, the art of debate. Now, you might expect to see two monks yelling at each other, right? But look closely. It's an angel playing an organ.
The message here is just, it's so profound. The art of true debate isn't about one side winning and the other losing. It's about creating harmony. The angel is playing with both hands, combining the high notes and the low notes. And it's that very contrast that makes music. In the same way, a truer, more complete idea comes from combining different points of view. But so often, that's not what we do, is it? Instead of making a harmony, we just make noise. We fall back on old, cheap tricks, like the ad hominem fallacy, where you just attack the person instead of actually dealing with their argument.
And the source text we're looking at it nails this problem. It says our political discourse often focuses on destroying the rival candidate personally, not their ideas, using what it calls the machina del fango, the mud machine. And that is the absolute opposite of building an arch or playing an organ.
So where does that leave us? What can we actually learn from these centuries-old pictures? Well, they actually offer us a pretty amazing and practical guide for how to have better, more meaningful disagreements.
Okay, so lesson 1, value the reflected light. Be open to the idea that wisdom can come from places you don't expect. Lesson 2, build like an arch. Remember that structured, respectful opposition is actually what creates strength. And finally, lesson 3, argue like an organist. The goal isn't for one note to drown out the other, it's to combine different perspectives to create something more beautiful and complete.
And that really leaves us with a final question to ask ourselves. In our own conversations, with our family, our friends, with strangers on the internet, what are we actually doing? Are we building strong arches through mutual respect and opposition? Or are we just throwing stones? Are we making music, or are we just adding to the noise?